Rapunzel. Once upon a time, there was a man and a woman who had longed for a child for a long time and had never had one. Finally, the woman became pregnant. These people had a small window in the back of their house, from which they could see into the garden of a fairy, which was full of flowers and herbs of all kinds, but no one dared to go into the garden. One day, the woman was standing at this window and looked down. There she saw beautiful Rapunzel growing in a bed and became so desperate to have some, even though she knew she couldn't get any, that she fell ill and miserable. Finally, her husband was alarmed and asked what was wrong. "Oh, if I don't get some of the Rapunzel from the garden behind our house to eat, I will die." The man, who loved her very much, thought, no matter what it costs, he would get her some, so he climbed over the high wall one evening and quickly picked a handful of Rapunzel, which he brought to his wife. The woman immediately made a salad out of it and ate it with great appetite. But they had tasted so good that the next day she had 3 times as much desire for it. The man saw that there would be no peace, so he climbed into the garden again, but he was greatly frightened when the fairy caught him and scolded him severely for daring to come into her garden and steal from it. He apologized as best he could, saying that his wife was pregnant and how dangerous it was to refuse her anything then. Finally, the fairy said, "I will be satisfied and allow you to take as much Rapunzel as you want, provided you give me the child that your wife is carrying now." In fear, the man agreed, and when the woman gave birth, the fairy appeared immediately, named the little girl Rapunzel, and took her away. This Rapunzel became the most beautiful child under the sun, but when she was 12 years old, the fairy locked her in a high tower that had no door or staircase, only a small window at the very top. When the fairy wanted to go in, she stood below and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had magnificent hair, fine as spun gold, and when the fairy called, she would let it down, wrap it around a window hook above, and then the hair fell 20 yards down, and the fairy climbed up it. One day, a young prince passed through the forest where the tower stood, saw beautiful Rapunzel standing at the window, and heard her singing with such a sweet voice that he fell completely in love with her. But since there was no door in the tower and no ladder could reach that high, he was in despair, but he went into the forest every day until one day he saw the fairy come and spoke. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." He saw which ladder could be used to climb up the tower. He remembered the words he needed to say, and the next day, when it was dark, he went to the tower and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." She let her hair down, and when it reached the ground, he tied it to himself and was pulled up. At first, Rapunzel was frightened, but she soon grew fond of the young prince and agreed to let him come up every day. They lived happily together for a long time, and the witch never found out until one day Rapunzel complained to her that her clothes were getting tight. The witch realized what had happened and was angry. She cut off Rapunzel's beautiful hair and banished her to a desert, where she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The same day that she banished Rapunzel, the witch hung the cut hair on a hook. When the prince came, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." She let down the hair, but the prince was surprised to find the witch instead of Rapunzel. The witch told him that Rapunzel was lost to him forever. The prince was devastated and jumped from the tower. He survived, but lost his sight. He wandered the forest, eating only grass and roots and weeping. Years later, he stumbled upon the desert where Rapunzel and her children lived. Her voice sounded familiar, and she recognized him. She hugged him, and 2 of her tears fell into his eyes, restoring his sight.